Perfect. So thank you, team, for being here again, right? And for the next session, we'll be talking about HR digital transformation. But before I go to the panelists to introduce themselves, just want to poll the audience here and those that are virtually as well. Please feel free to participate. Don't have to put your hands up or anything. Just think of your organizational journey if you are in HR and if you've most recently completed the transformation, whether it's the implementation of a talent acquisition function, ERP, whether it's Workday. Just think of that and think of the experience that you've had, right? So hopefully through this dialogue, we can talk about how to make it more creative, right? Learn from RBC's examples of digital transformation and really regrounding ourselves as to why we go on some of these digital transformations. I know at Johnson & Johnson, we went on a 4.5-year HR digital transformation solely just to make the patient's outcome that much better, right? And going back to Michelle's presentation earlier on that why aspect of it, I think a lot of times what we miss in a lot of these HR digital transformation is why are we doing this? I think it's easy to say we need to save 3 hours per business transaction, right? And get in the technical jargon, but sometimes we lose focus as to the why and the impact it has on the customer, patient, or whoever is consuming our product. So with that, I would love to pass it to Karin for her introduction.
Sure. Hi, my name is Karin Davis. I am the CEO and Chief Creativity Strategist. Yes, with Pink Pigs Fly is the company name. We are creativity specialists, and what we do is we help weave creativity into the DNA of an organization. We do that for increased and sustained innovation. We do it for increased productivity, increased employee experience. We're also now looking at how it can help optimize AI as well as reach ESG goals. So the power of creativity is really what I focus on.
Awesome. And then in your HR transformation journey?
So I myself am going through a small business complete digital transformation, always I feel like, and anyone else who's an entrepreneur or small business owner will understand that. Very different than, my experience is very different than yours would be, or yours would be, Oskar. But I think I'm also coming at it from a perspective of someone who's also been an employee who has experienced being part of that transformation and some of the challenges having been an employee in the past.
Awesome. Oskar?
Thanks, Guled, and I must say you're putting in quite a shift here over the last couple of days, so big thank you for that. Your panels have been excellent thus far, so hopefully we don't let you down. But in ways of introduction, my name is Oskar Feranc, and I lead the HR Digital Solutions team at RBC. I have a few colleagues here from the team as well, so if you do see him, please do say hi throughout the rest of the day. But ultimately, my team's responsible for driving the HR digital experience at RBC, and with that power comes great responsibility. And if you think about the size and scope that RBC is, over 100,000 global workforce in over 29 countries. So those folks access our tools and systems almost 1 million times every single month. So if you think about every time we take an individual away from their jobs or the things that they do every day, and those experiences aren't frictionless and allow them to go back to serve their purpose, and at RBC our purpose is helping clients thrive and communities prosper. So every time they're not having ideal HR experiences or HR systems and tools, it's taking them away from driving that ultimate purpose. And so, I think probably around 5-6 years ago, we were at a breaking point of having an archaic infrastructure in our current HR technologies, an archaic on-premise HCM system, and our employees expected consumer-grade experiences. And when I think about that, you think about the Amazons, you think about the Apple experiences, you pick up the phone, you will go shopping into your Amazon cart, it largely is frictionless. And so our employees are expecting those same experiences every single day. And so when we decided to do our own transformation, and we called it Reimagining HR, part of that was underpinned by driving and innovating technology across the bank, across our 100,000 plus global workforce. And I won't get into the details of exactly how that happened. I'm more than happy to have a conversation after the fact, but because I'd probably be here for a couple of hours. But a couple of key takeaways was, we looked at our global processes. So it wasn't just a technology change, it was really think about whether someone in Canada, someone in Malaysia, someone in Hong Kong, they should be experiencing the technologies the exact same way as much as we can. Obviously, there's always regulatory and compliance differences in those countries, but we wanted to make sure from our global processes, we standardize as much as possible. And along with that, we think about things like concepts like job architecture. What do people do in the organization? Before going live, we probably had over 15 to 20,000 job profiles describing the role of an individual across a workforce of 100,000 people. That is absolutely nuts to understand what our employees do. We've synthesized down to 2,500 job profiles. So again, if you look at that transformation, it wasn't just technology, it was employees, people, process, and technology. It really focused around those three parts. And so, we'll get into a little bit more about where we are today in that journey, but it started at understanding how we're transforming our own processes, our own architecture, as well as the technology to really influence that employee experience. And so, we're a few years removed from that, and there's been a lot of hard lessons learned around the change management journey of that, but I will certainly talk about that a little bit in a few minutes, but that's kind of been our journey thus far to date, and we're a couple of years removed from launching a global HCM, and our global HCM is Workday. So anyways, a couple of years removed from that, and there's definitely some good lessons learned from going through our own digital transformation, which we'll get into a little bit more in a few minutes.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Karin. Thank you, Oskar, right, for that intro. And picking back on something that you just said, Oskar, right now in terms of business process, right? From an HR perspective, I spent the better half of my career in exactly this space, right? So that's why this isn't so near and dear to my heart. And sometimes when you have like-minded HR individuals, we sometimes get very business process focused. Button number 2, button number 3, button number 4, and sometimes we lose that sense of creativity, right? So Karin, if I were to ask you, why is it important to weave in creativity as organizations are going on their HR digital transformation, and what type of different technologies can we strengthen the HR function with?
Yeah, I think you said something, Oskar, that immediately went click for me because you said reimagining HR. So when we use words like reimagine, re-envision, transformation, rethinking, all of that is founded in creativity. So we are using the power of creativity to come up with new ideas of value, and all of that can be, if we focus on creativity as a foundational component of our organization, not just HR, but of our organization, we can optimize all of that to really have greater impact. One of the interesting things about the technology is creativity can enhance technology in how you use it, and the technology can then enhance your creativity as an organization. So there's this really interesting dynamic and interconnectedness with creativity and technology. And the fact that we've so many of the things that I've been listening to for the 2 days have come back and connected to creativity in one way or another. We've talked about curiosity so many times. So how, being curious about how this might have impact, being curious about how this might affect a certain group of people. Looking at things from a systems perspective. So again, it's not just transformation in HR. If you're doing digital transformation, it's at an organizational level, right? You've got to look at where it's going to connect and where it's going to have impact in other areas. One of the things that I think every business professional should learn, other than creativity, of course, is systems thinking and the connection between creativity and systems thinking. We run into trouble when we get into these silos, of course, right? We've talked about silos and needing to break down silos for a number of reasons as well.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And what resonates with what you just said right now, Karin, is sometimes in the thought process when we talk about digital transformation or technology or systems, we think of it in very binary terms, 0 and 1, right, as an example. And when you infuse that level of creativity, you end up getting better results, right? There's a lot of studies that say that, so thank you for that. Oskar, you briefly touched on the HR digital transformation journey at RBC. Could you elaborate a little bit on the journey and where you are today?
Oh boy. So a couple of things. We're at a cusp of, we've created a new foundation layer of, when I mentioned, creating global standard processes. It's allowed us to really think about how we do data analytics, how we extract value from having the consistency in our systems and tools in our data. We're at the cusp of now everybody thinking about what else do we need to impact the employee experience. And I'm sure all of you have gone through this in your organizations of a prioritization discussion. I think I have the next great system. I've talked to this vendor and they're selling me on the next big product. And so we're at the cusp where we've made some decisions on how we think about and we call it the service delivery model. And for lack of a better way of saying, or simplifying the term, is how do employees interact with human resources? Do they pick up the phone and call? Do they create a case in a digital system? Whatever that may be, it's how do you simplify that service delivery model? And so we're at the point where we're making considered decisions of simplifying how employees interact with us, how they find the information they need, where are the policies stored, how do I put in a transaction? And so as part of that journey, we've really enabled or empowered employees and managers to self-serve. My God, that's been a blessing and a curse at the same time. We, as HR professionals in the past, everything was very manual, Excel form-based, there was a lack of self-service. We've completely turned the dial and empowered, and I say empowered, we've given the ability to self-service. That change journey has been extremely difficult, and we really misunderstood around how difficult that change was going to be. And so over the last couple of years, the focus has been really on meeting employees where they are in the systems and the technologies, and really trying to simplify for what we as HR professionals thought were the right processes, thought they were the right tools. And so we're actually trying to pull back in some ways of thinking about, do we need another user interface? Do we need another separate talent management tool? And employees naturally gravitate to, can I just get things done as quickly as possible? And so I think our prioritization discussions nowadays are focused around the employee at the center of our discussions, and we really challenge ourselves to really think about, if we're purchasing another product or integrating another solution, how does that work in concert with all of the other technologies in our ecosystem? And what does that mean from a change management perspective? And so before, and again, we were completely transparent, in moment of transparency, years ago, we went for best-of-breed solutions. And so we would purchase a lot of best-of-breed solutions and connect them in a pipeline, but employees had 5 systems to transact with HR, which is absolutely crazy because no one understood how to submit a performance form, then to put on their vacation, then submit their time off or overtime. And so anyways, I think back to the consumer good experiences, we're trying to really simplify that front door for them. So as part of that journey, I think we're at the cusp of now really think about, and we'll talk about generative AI in a little bit because it's a topic I'm really passionate on, but we're really thinking about what are those emerging technologies that are supporting us and simplifying that experience for employees.
Thank you, Oskar. And I think one thing that you just said really resonates with me with regards to the manager self-service concept, right? I mean, I hear it a lot of times at my organization and prior organizations where a lot more responsibility is being offset onto the people leader. And one thing that I keep hearing is that, Guled, you're not the only one that's doing this. I'm hearing this from finance, from procurement, from IT. So now all of a sudden, I have to run a business, I have to run a team, and on top of that, all of the additional work is being offloaded onto me. We just have to make sure that we talk as an organization, right? So, what I would pose to all of you is, as you go back to your organizations, look at your HR digital transformation and look at your organizational transformation and figure out how do you tie into or plug into other go lives or systems and make the employee experience collectively better, and don't look at it only functionally from an HR perspective.
Good. Try telling an investment banker to put in their vacation time into Workday.
I would add to that, rather than trying to integrate it after the fact, trying to head it off in the past and actually plan and strategize ahead of time.
Correct.
To try to, and I know I'm saying something that's easier said than done, but the idea that we're constantly trying to integrate because we're not looking at it from that larger perspective to begin with. And then something you were talking about that particularly for small businesses, medium-sized businesses, attaching to a system that you've decided on, and then you find out this just does not work, and we keep using it, because we spent money on it, we spent time on it. We need to get over that sunk cost fallacy, right? And say, this is not working, we're actually disengaging employees, we're losing employees, we're not making their lives easier. We need to accept that, learn from that, and move on, right? Yeah. It's hard.
So Karin, I know you, in your previous response, you mentioned ways in which organizations can breed, or the importance of breeding in creativity in the HR digital transformation. Could you provide some very tactical examples that anyone can take home today?
Absolutely. So I think if you're looking to bring more creativity to HR digital transformation or any kind of transformation, you really have to look at what is it that we mean by creativity. We need to have individuals who have skills and the mindset and the confidence to be creative. That all connects to a lot of the things we've been talking about, psychological safety, the culture of the organization, everything to do with creativity is connected to all of the things we've talked about, which I'm finding, just fascinating over these past 2 days. So, you've got the individuals. You have to ensure that the teams that are working on these projects have processes for deliberate creative problem solving. There is ways to work in collaborative groups that can either deter creativity or enhance creativity. We need leaders who can foster those teams to encourage and support that creativity. Again, that connects to the leadership and authentic leadership and the modeling of failure and risk and being open to accepting mistakes. Those types of things are all connected to growth of creativity. And then the culture overall. And those, if you combine those things, pull them together, that gives you a foundation of creativity that can then support the type of change that you're looking for, be it digital or other.
So what's one
One
concrete
thing,
example?
yeah. I think the first thing is to understand the value of creativity, what it actually is. I mean, it's an incredibly difficult concept to explain in a few minutes, but if you look at it from it being a cognitive process that is open and allows for greater innovation, greater productivity and employee experience, there's a power of just understanding and grasping that creativity is value, and there's a business reason that we focus on creativity. So that would be my first thing, is really get to understand what creativity is.
Awesome. Yeah. Great, perfect. So Oskar, I know you mentioned, and I've gone through a lot of digital transformations myself. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. Different organizational size, different organizational makeups, different target audiences, right, and different timelines, different degrees to which is okay. I've been to some organizations where it has to be perfection. Others where let's get us 80% of the way, and then we'll figure out during hypercare. How do you ensure employees? When we look at the employee perspective, how do you ensure employees are not left behind on the digital HR transformation, with a bit of a double click here on all the diversity dimensions, whether we're talking about generational, age, ethnicity, so on and so forth, and then the different employee segments in our business. Many of us have field-based, office-based, or customer service-facing roles, and each of their experiences on the journey might look fundamentally different.
Yeah, this is a really tricky question, and Karin, to your point on creativity, I think you do have to be very creative on how you impact, influence, and support employees through a change, and there's absolutely no one-size-fits-all model. You can have learning, you could have training, you could have hands-on. I mean, you name it, we've all tried it. You still will not be able to hit and target every single employee in the organization because people naturally learn different. They're curious about different things. The way they learn is different. And I will read an excerpt from one of our business lines. This morning, there was in a people manager chat, there's probably 700 people managers in here, and I think it articulates so well what change management means to an organization. So I'll read you the dialogue, and bear with me here for a little bit. So Maria says, "Hello everyone, question, how do we now deduct a week of purchase vacation?" To which Kevin responded, "Was it put into Workday as purchase vacation, question mark? If so, there is nothing else to do." Then she responded, "That's what I think, but how do we deduct the amount? Before Workday, I had to calculate and process the amount through payroll also." To then the reply was, "I did it last year. As long as the time off is entered in Workday as purchase vacation, the payroll piece is taken care of automatically. It worked great." And then Kevin wrapped it up, "As much of a headache Workday may have been to adjust to, it does have some benefits to minimize certain work efforts." And I mean, it's a funny example, but I think the point is, for especially my team, to be in this dialogue where the employees are, what they're saying. And even in that example, I went back to thinking of, why did that individual not know that Workday automatically does the payroll calculation? So it's great that it did, but she still had to ask the question. And so I think a lot of it is listening to our employees, finding ways to get feedbacks, having champions in the business to support employees through a change. But nothing beats having intuitive experiences. I cannot stress this enough. When you build the right experiences for your people, they will not need the level of change management and rigor that you believe to be. And again, all of us have some type of cell phone. We've all adjusted. We do all regular updates. Usually, Google or Apple have some type of swiping through where there's like, here's what we've changed the last couple of editions. For us, we just kind of sometimes dump it on employees and be like, figure it out for yourself. And so I think, and we put the knowledge of burden on our employees. So we think natively that they have to understand how our processes work in HR. they shouldn't need to know it. It should guide them through the experience, meet them where they are. So I think one big learning for us was really keep the human at all of our solutions, at the center of our solutions. And so we actually do a lot of journey mapping work where we bring employees in, have them test drive some of our solutions. We try to get a lot of feedback. We're actually launching a tool, a digital adoption tool within one of our systems to actually look at what employees are doing in the system, how long they're transacting in certain transactions. Again, we want both the empirical evidence, but also the anecdotal from our employees. So anyways, I thought that was a funny example of how we're doing things better, but we still have a long ways to go.
Yeah, no, I think Oskar, that example does a really good job of shedding light on the fact that we as HR professionals are very familiar with our processes because we live, breathe it, we troubleshoot with individuals on a regular basis. Then the employee on the other line might be interacting with that for the first time. They might have 1 hire per year, 2 terminations per year. So for them, for the employee, they're learning that system every single time they go through it, whereby we know it by the back of our hands because we hang up the phone, the next person that calls, walking through that same example, right? So it's how do we provide that empathy to the employee in this case, right? And guide them through the conversation. But I love your comments with regards to
we in HR know it best.
Karin, over to you. How can organizations leverage creativity in the hybrid virtual work environments? I know we've had a lot of presentations and conversations around being able to master, and I would argue one can't master the hybrid solution, but how can we live in embedding creativity into flex work?
Yeah, creativity, for me, everything that I did around creativity before COVID was face-to-face, and I had to do my own creative thinking and transformation about how do I take all these face-to-face activities that are very tactile and people moving around rooms and doing these things that I know enhance creativity in a group environment, and how do I transform that into a virtual experience? There are tools that can definitely support that, and more are coming out now as virtual and hybrid work is growing. I know I heard someone mention Mural the other day. Mural and Miro are two of probably the most popular tools that can be used. They can simulate brain or ideation and using Post-it notes, and you can draw, and you can do some of those things that you would do on a whiteboard or on flip chart paper. There's tools. I know Zoom is starting to add on additional elements that you can use to enhance creativity. It's a little bit clunky because you got different apps all over the place, so it's not necessarily a seamless process. Butter is another one that has come up that is great for creative facilitation. But I think it's, you got to combine the original concepts of how do we support the thinking process of being creative, and that the environment, the culture, right, all of that still has to come into play, and you have to be able to move that into a hybrid situation. So it's not just about the technology, right? It's about integrating the technology as well as the best practices for eliciting creativity.
For sure.
Yeah.
And if I were to put my DE&I hat on for a second, a lot of great Mural, love it, right? A lot of great solutions. The one thing that I think teams, as you start looking for creative ways to solve our flex work dilemma that we're in, think about accessibility. Not everyone in your organization might be able to use that platform. So while it's a great option, just think of it also from an accessibility perspective for our diverse population, diverse abilities population, or individuals with disabilities.
And just to build on that, when you were talking about getting feedback from employees, we've talked about surveys being, something that we've talked about a lot the last couple of days, and as much as that's a great digital tool to get feedback in bulk, and we can sort of, play with the data, you were talking about the importance of that face-to-face connection, and I know we spoke about that last session about still making sure we're having that human interaction and connection. And the idea of watching people use the technology that you think is great, and you think, well, this is easy. I know how to do this, and then you put someone in that position, and you go, they don't know where to go. And I'm like, I thought that was easier than it is. Okay, we got to go back to the drawing board, right? So I've had that experience in Mural where I'm like, I can just teach it to them in 5 minutes. No. Right? Like if you're going to use Mural or Miro, you have to really be in deep with it, not just at a quick workshop or something like that.
Yeah. So we have approximately 5 minutes left, just one question for each of you, and then we'll open it up, audience, for questions from all of you. If I were to ask both of you, your thoughts of upcoming and emerging technologies within the space of HR and how we can best leverage it, right? Specifically, artificial intelligence, machine learning, large language models. What are each of your thoughts in terms of how to best enable the use of that technology to increase the employee experience? Maybe if I start with you, Karin?
Yeah, well, I mean, if we're talking about things like ChatGPT, the presentation we had yesterday was amazing, and I think that just goes to show you how thinking differently about how we might use these tools can enhance the outcomes, right? So I always say if everyone's using ChatGPT and other AI in the same way, if we're all asking the same questions, we're going to all get the same responses, right? So we need to be very creative about types of questions, how we word them, how we're prompting, how we're teaching the software to understand who our employees are, what their particular segmentations are, all of those things. And the more we can teach it to be creative, then the more we can use it to come up with creative ideas around recruitment, around learning and personalizing things. So again, it's that, using it to be creative, or teaching it to being creative about how we use it so we can be creative with it.
Perfect. And Oskar?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts from helping people understand what AI and machine learning actually is and the safe use of AI and machine learning in your organizations. Naturally, at a large organization and a bank, heavily regulated, there is a lot of necessarily pushback, but hesitancy around implementing generative AI and machine learning into our practices. And if we do so, it's got to make sure we test out the models that's supported to make sure that it reduces bias, et cetera. We did launch our first iteration of generative AI in an HR-specific use case just a couple of months ago, specific to benefits enrollment. And if you think about the experience, we didn't personalize it to the employee. Our risk team wasn't happy with that, so we didn't go down that path. But what we did do is parse out all of your booklets and pages of what you're eligible for from an employee benefits perspective. And during benefits enrollment, we created a bot that basically has natural language processing to have a conversation with you around what benefit enrollment mean to you, what your dental ability to pay your dental or your physiotherapy bills, etc. So you can, or what drugs you're eligible for as part of your benefits. You can have a natural conversation with the bot itself, and it doesn't feel like an if and then statement where like you ask the wrong question and you get some random reply. It actually is able to process the context of how you're asking the question, and is able to then have follow-up questions and conversations. This actually shifted the model of how our HR advice operational teams support our employees, where they were no longer dealing with what I call the low-level, less complex question, because the bot is able to take that on. And so I think for us, it's a safe and equitable way to really think about how do we get employees comfortable with the idea of AI, and now we're getting really creative around what are some other use cases we can continue to continue on that creative path of using generative AI to simplify the experience, lessen the burden of our operational teams. And so again, I think it's just continue to think about use cases in a safe way before we start to proliferate and really try to embed the ChatGPT and the large language models and go wild and ask any question you want. So, but that use case has been tremendously well received so far. So we're really excited about the power of generative AI.
I love that use case because I've been in HR for a long time, and I still dread benefit enrollment because I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. What's the best suggestion for me? We have time for one question, but all three of us, well, Karin and Oskar, the subject matter experts, will be around for any of your one-on-one questions. Are there any questions? I think there's one back there.
Thanks for the presentation. I'm curious about how was the communication with employees about using AI for your organization, because it's a bit touchy.
We kept this a very low-key launch. So we had a chatbot for benefits enrollment last year, but it was very much I call it a stupid bot. It just basically gave you very simple responses to very simple questions. We replaced that bot with generative AI. The differences on the wrapper and the legal disclaimer, we made it very front and center that you're interacting with generative AI technology, which means it's generating content as you're asking the question. And so again, we worked with our legal team to make sure that the language created very little onus on RBC to take on that ownership of the legal risk behind it, and said it is there just to help and guide and support the answers you're taking, and not meant to be the ultimate, final answer that's given. And our generative AI bot actually parses out our benefits booklets and gives you links to where you can go to find more information, or where that information was sourced from. So to your point around communication, we're trying to slowly roll out the idea, and as employees are comfortable using generative AI, we're making sure that we have the right legal disclaimer around it and letting them know what it is that they're interacting with, and that it is actually generating net new content that is not somebody else or not a predefined if and then kind of statement.
Perfect. So with that, I think we're at time. So thank you, Oskar. Thank you, Karin. Team, round of applause for them.
Thank you.
And both Karin and Oskar will be there to answer any questions that anyone has after.
Actually, my team's here, so bug my team if you need to. They'll answer the hard questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very well done.